Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Evelyn People Show. I'm your host, Mark Matthews, and I have an interesting show for you tonight. I like my lighting tonight. Look at my melanin. My melanin be popping tonight, peoples. I didn't see that before. Look at this melanin I got going on. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about blaming on the alcohol. Now, blaming on the alcohol, you see, it's interesting because there's a lot of things that get blamed on alcohol, and some of them, it's true enough, should have been, should be, and some not so much. And some of the times when we think about alcohol, we think about excessive drinking of alcohol. We talk about people that do the whole alcohol bit in excess, but then there are people who don't. There's that level between excess and sobriety that's a little gray area and has some potential. All right. But before we go any further, let's talk about the fact that I am Mark Matthews. I'm your host of the Evelyn People Show. I'm an author of a book called, watch this, Love, Life, Confrontation, Expression, Selections from the Chronicles of a Black Man. It's available in Jamaica at Fontana Pharmacy. It's available worldwide on Amazon.com. So, as we were saying, if you missed last week's show, go back and check it out. Last week, we were talking about first dates. In fact, the last 2 weeks, we were talking about first dates. And we were talking about just how that first date has that magic potential. First dates, last 2 shows, we talk about first dates and how first dates have that magic potential. There were people that checked in while we were on the show that were saying, yo, they are still with their first date. 25 years later, they're with their first date. And I had a lot of fun doing those 2 shows because I'm aware of the magic that first date has, the potential that first date has. All right. So if you missed those 2 shows, go check them out. But tonight, we are going to be talking about blaming it on the alcohol. Now, before I go any further, Simone, thanks for checking in, my day. Glowing is glowing. You know what I mean? My melanin is popping today. I look like I have a tan that I didn't even know I had. Appreciate you. Remember by checking in. Bless up yourself, my dear. We have Linus Reed checking in. I'm looking. You see that? I appreciate you. I appreciate you so much. Appreciate you so much. So let's talk about blaming on the alcohol. So typically when we talk about alcohol, we talk about drinking and so on. Even if you were to take up your phone right now and Google effects of alcohol, they're only going to have the extreme. They're only going to have the high blood pressure. They're going to have the heart disease. They're going to have the stroke. They're going to have the liver disease, the digestive problems, the cancer, the weakening of your immune system. And these are, in fact, side effects of alcohol. These are the things that affect that these are things that can happen to you if you do abuse alcohol. Okay. But what I want to talk about tonight is way before you get to abusing alcohol per se, because there's a lot of levels in between, having a drink and having, liver disease. There's a lot of levels in between those 2 things. So I want to talk about that little in between. I want to talk about that little in between, right? I want to talk about before you get to the point where you're over the limit. I want to talk about before you get to the point where, there's a problem or your friends all invite you over and say, hey, Martin, we want to talk to you. We want to have an intervention. Yeah, we're talking about before we get all to the intervention point. I mean? We want to talk about consuming alcohol, what it does to the body, but before it gets to the point where, I mean, your doctor is telling you that, yeah, dude, you need to change your lifestyle and all these things. There are several levels in between A and B that gets you there. All right, forgive me, my chair tripping right now. Anyways, now what happens in that in between point that we're talking about, that alcohol, and probably why alcohol gets so many people in trouble, and what we're going to base our show blaming on the alcohol on tonight is this: what alcohol does to the body, what alcohol does to the brain before you cross over into that excessive state. It reaches that state after probably one or two drinks, where it increases the activity in the dopamine neutrons or neurons in your brain. That's also where the opioid section of your brain is, or your brain cells are, and it releases endorphins. It releases endorphins. And what that is basically saying in layman's terms is that it increases your feeling of joy. It increases your feeling of joy. It increases your feeling of pleasure. It increases your feeling of euphoria. So you have one drink, you have two drink, depending on your tolerance, you have three drinks, right? And before you get to that point where, the fatigue, the slurred speech, and all that, we're not talking about alcoholics, okay? We're not talking about alcoholics. We have Vimba saying that the endorphins make you happy. Yes, the endorphins make you happy. So we're not talking about alcoholics that drink in excess. We ain't talking about those people. The slurred speech, the people that want to fight everybody, the one in the corner of the room crying and all these things. Those are not the people we're talking about. We're talking about the people that are at the point where they've had a drink or two, and the endorphins, that pleasure, that dopamine neuron section of the brain that gets heightened by alcohol in consumption. That's the part that gets triggered, and it is in that little window of opportunity that we're having a show on tonight. And it is the things that you do in that section that we want to talk about tonight. Yeah. So what happens at that time is that your inhibitions are lowered. Your inhibitions are lowered. Your worry and stress feeling of unpleasantness are lowered. Listen to what I'm saying to you. After that drink or that second drink, your inhibitions are lowered. The worry and stress feeling of unpleasantness that people typically have is lowered. So you're in that moment of zen at this point. You're in that moment of zen. Um, and that's what we're gonna have the show on tonight, is when you are in that moment of zen, that feeling where the alcohol that you have consumed actually increases the dopamine, or increasing activity in the dopamine neurons in your brain. Your body starts feeling that feeling of joy, of pleasure, of euphoria. And when you're in that state, that feel good state, that's the state we want to talk about. It is the activities that you do while in that state that we want to zoom in on today. So the questions I put out when I created the event for the show was, what have you done? What are the things that you have done while in this state that you're probably not gonna announce to everybody? In fact, you're never gonna lead with that. You know what I mean? I've seen people dance on tables. Because we even have a name for it. We have a name for it. The name we have for it is called liquid courage. Liquid courage, and liquid courage kind of takes two forms. Liquid courage takes two forms. The forms liquid courage take is is the things you say that you wouldn't normally say, and the things you do that you would normally do. Now, ask yourself this. Ask yourself this. I am asking you this. What what was that thing? When is the last time you got yourself some liquid courage? Whether you were setting out to get liquid courage or not, you might have just had a drink. You might have just had two drinks. And the liquid courage came with the two drinks because, like we pointed out before, it increases the activity in the dopamine neurons in your brain. You got that feeling of joy, you got that feeling of pleasure, you got that feeling of euphoria, you got your inhibitions lowered. And while you were in that moment, you said something. You said something to someone, you did something. Like we said, liquid courage, which is, and liquid courage, if I were to define it, is things that you do when you've had a drink that you would not normally do under normal circumstances. That's what liquid courage is. It is when you've had a drink and you do something, say something that you would not normally do, and you're doing it because you've had a drink or two or three, right? What have you done? Have you seen somebody do something? Have you seen somebody say something? Have you yourself experienced where after you've had two drinks, you need to make sure you are checking yourself? Because typically at that point, the first, second, or third thing that comes to your mind is not something that you would normally say. And if you don't check yourself, if you're not that aware in that moment as the feeling of pleasure rises, as the dopamine neurons gets triggered by the alcohol, and then you now are in a position where, oh my God, did I say that? Or you wake up tomorrow morning in a place that you're asking yourself, oh my God, how did I get here? What did I do? Did I compromise myself? Did I compromise even more than that? Right? Let's see what Vimba is saying. I will say though, when I was younger, I was very shy, and I used liquid courage to loosen up. So, could liquid courage be a positive thing? Absolutely. Absolutely, liquid courage can be a positive thing, Bimba. Liquid courage can definitely be a positive thing. But you see, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not talking about the instances where people go over the limit. Excessive drinking can be a problem. Being an alcoholic is a problem. Okay. We ain't talking about those people. We're talking about the people that gain that liquid courage after one, two, three drinks. And then in that moment when they're in that feel good feeling, that the increased dopamine neurons trigger when they're activated by alcohol. That's the period that we're talking about. And it can be a good thing because sometimes we don't live our truth. You know what I mean? Sometimes we live in situations where, or we exist in situations where there are things that we should say to people that we don't say. And that liquid courage actually does help us to say those things. You know what I mean? But mind you, like we're saying, we're not advocating excess. We're talking about that little niche in between that one to three drink when the inhibitions get subsided, and like some people would say, the true self comes out, or the inhibited self comes out. Let's put it that, not even the true self, the inhibited self comes out. And sometimes that inhibited self needs to come out. Sometimes that inhibited self needs to say what it has to say, and whatever go happen as a result of it happens as a result of it. You know what I mean? And yes, you can blame it on the alcohol after the fact, but sometimes that inhibited self that comes out after a drink or two drinks needs to come out sometime. Because sometimes we overanalyze things, we overprocess things, and because of that, we don't say what needs to actually be said. Sometimes some of these things need to be said. Sometimes somebody needs to be checked here or there along the way. And sometimes if you do actually get that liquid courage, you don't say it, you don't check them, and they need to be checked. Check them. Anywho, I felt like I could be more of a social butterfly. Okay, and that is that feeling. You see, that's the feeling that you feel in that moment. Now, mind you, if you continue drinking or you don't take a break while drinking to allow the the level of alcohol in the blood to kind of level off, drink some water, balance off yourself. Then you're going to cross over into the more unpleasant other side where you feel the slump, you feel the fatigue, the slurred speech, you want to fight everybody, or you're in the corner of the wherever you are crying. You don't want to get to that point. You want to actually just kind of cruise control it while you when you get to that point so the feel good feeling lasts. Okay. All right. Now uh liquid courage is what we spoke about. We talk about the things you say, we talk about the things you do. I've been in situations where, so I dated someone. I went out on a date, not even dated someone. I went out on a date with someone. So help me here. I go out on a date with someone, right? We went to one place, and the person had a few drinks, and I guess the person really doesn't drink. 2 hours later, I'm finding myself, I could see when the person crossed over into that inhibited state, right? The things they started to say, they were laughing excessively at my jokes. I know I can be funny at times, but they were laughing. The jokes weren't that funny. Yeah. They were laughing excessively at the jokes, and I'm like, oh God, we're in trouble here. So I found myself at a place fairly far away from home with someone who was drunk after 2 or 3 drinks, but because they didn't drink, they were drunk. So here I am on a first date with someone who is drunk. And I'm like, dude, what are you going to do? And then I'm like, okay, I can take you back to your place and take a Uber back to I can drive your car, take you to your place, and take a Uber back to my car. And mind you, this is somebody I just met. I literally just met that person at that time. I met the person online. We went out, 2, 3 drinks in. The person is drunk. Like I am not feeling comfortable letting this person drive home by themselves. So I said, okay, I'll take you home in your car, and then I'll take an Uber to my car. I go to the person's house, and they're loopy. They're totally loopy. And I'm like, what do you do? How do you get here? What comes next? Right? And when you're in situations like that, so what the point I'm making with all this is 2 points actually. One point is you don't have to actually drink in excess to get past the limit. If you don't drink and you go out and you have 1 or 2 drinks, you can get yourself into a situation where what I mean, you are at the mercy of whomever you're with. And you don't want to wake up tomorrow morning and ask yourself, where am I? How did I get here? Why am I naked? What happened last night? That's the situation you don't want to find yourself in. You know what I mean? And sometimes if you don't drink regularly and you just go out one night and drink, you might find yourself in a situation where you are blaming it on the alcohol. But what I'm saying is you got to be careful, because sometimes you might end up crossing lines you don't really want to cross. You know what I mean? And yes, I drove the person home, and I was nervous. I was nervous, even though they were the one over the limit. I was nervous, but I drove them home. Stayed with them, made sure they were all right, gave them something to drink. This is somebody I just met. Yeah, I'm in the person's house. Like I'm like putting them in bed, putting cover on them, and I'm like, oh my god, like this is crazy. Because A, the person is in a situation where you can take advantage of them, and B, the person is in a situation where they might not actually accurately recall what happened, and that could be bad news for you. You know what I mean? So I make sure they were good, call my Uber, jump into the Uber, and took me back to my car. But you got to be careful with stuff like that. You got to be careful with stuff like both as the person being intoxicated and as the person being around the person that's intoxicated. You know what I mean? Because it could blow back on you too. All right, let's get caught up on these. Let's get caught up on these comments before we jump off here. Um, it releases suppressed emotions. If you're sexually frustrated, it sends you in that direction. If you're suppressing sadness, you usually, so okay, I get that, I feel that, and you're right. So it's a thing, it gives you that, because here's the thing, it's the part of the brain that it goes to, it's the feel good thing, it kind of like reverses whatever your frustration is. So while you're in that zone, that 1 2 maybe 3 drink zone, depending on your tolerance, you are in a place where, yeah, you can do some stuff that in the morning you end up blaming it on the alcohol, because a feel good feeling made you feel in that moment that everything you did is good to go. By saying, I had a friend of mine that jumped on the stage of a club and joined the girls dancing. Security quickly got her off the stage, and stuff like that will happen. I've been in a place where I see somebody jump up on a table and start dancing, and I'm like, what is happening here? What is happening here? You know, I mean, you're on stage and you're dancing, so it's crazy. Um, and let's see what someone is saying. Yep, low tolerance of alcohol. Yep, you have people that do have a low tolerance, and one and done. They have one drink, that is it for the night. You have to keep your eye on them, because they are going to do something when they don't remember in the morning, or they will get themselves in a trouble. Blame it on the alcohol is what we're talking about, people. And I know some people won't admit, but I know you. You've done it. You've done something. There was that one time that you went out and had potentially even that one drink. You go to a wedding, them have a punch, you drink the punch. Next thing you know, yeah, the things that you don't usually do. You know what I mean? Because your inhibitions have significantly been lowered, simply because this is what alcohol does to the body. You know what I mean? And like I said, we ain't talking about people that abuse alcohol. We're talking about people that one moment in time, or they know that when they get to that point when they've had 2 drinks in them, their inhibitions are just so lowered that they can't trust themselves beyond a certain point, because they can get themselves in some real good trouble. You have another thing called, um we're talking about liquid courage. You have beer goggles, and beer goggles is like when you just, yeah, you see, beer goggles is when you see somebody now, but you're seeing them through the fact that you've had a drink or two. God forbid you spend the night with them and wake up beside them in the morning. You're like, oh, you know that mask movie when my boy I jump out and say, yeah. That's when, because you have been drinking, that's the only reason you thought this person was attractive. This person ain't attractive. At least this person is not an attractive person that you would perceive attractive if you were not drinking. Yeah. So you find yourself in a situation. You wake up in the morning. The alcohol the alcohol content in your blood has been significantly reduced, and all of a sudden the person that you're with is not as attractive as they looked last night while you were drinking. Yeah, we shouldn't do these things. There things, these are things we should avoid. All right, now, like I said about the damsel that I dropped home one time, because I'm not gonna come on here and not tell you all about my personal experience. Can we keep it real on it, right? There's another person I was with one time who drank a bit much, and you know what I mean, I took the person home. The person had an upstairs place, and it's one of those places that had the stairs outside. So you took the stairs up. I took the person inside, put them inside, only walked in to put them in a sofa. You're good? Yes. I go back out, close the door, walk down to my car, and I was like, wow, what the hell? I turn the car up, I'm about to reverse, and the person is behind the car. I almost ran them over. I almost ran them over. And I was like, what? Like, how did you get down the stairs without tripping and killing yourself? Like, yeah. Yeah, that was a lot. That was a lot. But yeah, you, like I said, you do not want to get yourself into the situations where you are excessively consuming alcohol, because there are serious side effects that you can get from excessively consuming alcohol. However, before you go from sober to excessively using alcohol, there's that level in between, which I would like to call the sweet spot. There's that sweet spot in between where the inhibitions get released and you can have a really fun night, or you can have a night that you would rather remove from your mind because of some of the things that you got yourself into. You know what I mean? By saying that's hilarious. I know, right? So, all right, peoples, yeah, I'm gonna leave it right there because you see, y'all don't want to talk about. Y'all don't really want to get into your your thing, and I'm not gonna force the issue. I'm not gonna push it. What I'm gonna do, because we on the Even People show, is I'm gonna use some poetry to get to the meat of the matter. And I'm cutting it because I want to do poem. I want to do two poems for you tonight. All right. I want to do two poems for you tonight. And the first poem that I'm gonna read for you is Gray Areas. Gray Areas. And I'm reading from my book, like I said, called Love Life Confrontation Expressions. Selections from the Chronicles of a Black Man, available in Fontana pharmacies in Jamaica and Amazon.com. Just as Google the name, Google my name, you should find it. Anyways, gray areas. The topic alone should tell you what it's about. It's about some gray areas. Alcoholic consumption, alcohol consumption can take you into some gray areas. So think about everything we spoke about so far as we go forward and see what applies to what we've said so far. Let me pull up close. Let me pull up close. I don't want y'all to miss it, right? Okay, so here we go. Great areas says where what you know meets what could have been, where you know you shouldn't, but you jump right in, where the black meets the white, but then not quite, where inhibitions seem to disappear if just for the night, where the brain says no, but the body says yes. When you wake up, can't remember, looking for evidence of sex, where the rules are there, though not quite defined, when it's all in the air, waiting on time. When you're not quite sure if you're coming or going, and it all stands still. When you say you won't, but then maybe you will. When what you did for the last time was the third last time, when you'll never think of it again, yet it's always on your mind. When the warning lights are flashing, still you tiptoe in. When you stop and say a prayer just before you sin. When you hear your mouth speak of things your brain can't decide. When you don't stop yourself slipping, though you don't want to slide. When your heart's not hearing what your brain is saying and you're weak in the knees. When he's bad for you and you know it, still you cherish moments like these. This is from the Book of Confrontation written in 2012. The poem is called Great Areas and it is lit. Think about what we've covered so far. This poem is talking about this one is talking about when your brain says no, but your body says yes. That's what we've been talking about. We're talking about blaming on the alcohol. We're talking about situations that you find yourself in where because you've consumed a few drinks, your inhibitions have been so lowered that you now do things that you would not normally do. The poem we read is Great Areas. The third stanza of the poem says, when the brain says no, when the body says yes. When you wake up, can't remember, looking for evidence of sex. One of those kind of nights you had, huh? One of those nights that you went out, you had a drink, he looked nice, she looked nice. Next thing you know, it's tomorrow, and you're like, what happened last night again? When did this happen? And yeah, one of those nights. You know what I mean? It says where the rules are there, though not quite defined, when it's all up in the air waiting on time. That those are kind of nights we're talking about. But like I said, we're keeping it moving tonight. If you do have the book, check it out. If you join the show late, go back and wheel up on so you can get all the information and you can get all the dots to connect to get us to where we are now. And tonight I'm in that mood where I'm going to give you two for the price of one. I'm going to give you a second poem tonight. And the poem I'm going to give you tonight is called The Spirits. Now, how can we be talking about blaming on the alcohol? We not talk about the spirits. So let's talk about the spirits before I jump off this show. So the spirits, get right to it. The spirit says alcoholic beverages and bad decisions, courting and flirting and different positions. The never ending dialogue that always incites, the toe curling lovemaking that lasts through the night, the subtle touch that means oh so much, the accelerated outcome of a crush. The morning after, when my surroundings are strange, sobriety resumes, and now you feel estranged. Your mind sorts through the events as you drive home, combing the timeline with a fine tooth comb. We were here, then we left. But when did we do that? Enough pieces to solve the puzzle, though not quite exact. A night you remember, but wish you forgot. Curiously, no, consciously, never going back to that spot. Viewing yourself in a whole new light, realizing new boundaries that are out of sight. Intoxication that induces forgiveness, a free for all that's endless, a pleasure seeking, no remorse binge, the doors coming totally unhinged. The distance between the saint and the sinner, finding that one in a million winner, the new that redefines the old, the total embodiment of the soul. The end. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the spirit. And we are talking about blaming it on the alcohol. And this poem, The Spirit, starts off by saying alcoholic beverages and bad decisions. I could have ended that poem right there. Alcoholic beverages and bad decisions. Need I say more? Unless you're Amish or you just don't drink at all, you gonna have something. If I just said alcoholic beverages and bad decisions, and you are not out in the 21st century or whatever century, you probably have something that you can fit inside that those parameters. You know what I mean? It goes on and says, your mind sorts through the events on the drive home, combing the timeline with a fine-tooth comb. We were here, then we left, but when did we do that? When did that happen? When did something happen that made me wake up someplace that I'm not quite sure where I'm at? I'm looking beside me to see who I'm. And mind you now, mind you, mind you, I don't want to add nothing to you that ain't true. I don't want to pin something on you that you have no idea about. And if you're out there and this has never happened to you, okay, it's never happened to you. But if you're out there and this has happened to you, you know what you did. You know where you were. Like I said, I saw you and I know who you are. That's because probably this happened to me too. And I ain't even out here trying to judge you. I'm just saying these things happen to people. I'm an author of poetry. My poetry is about stuff that happen, real things that happen to real people in real life, right? The next stanza says, a night you'll remember, but wish you forgot. Consciously never going back to that spot. That's that day you had that one that went straight to your head because you hadn't eaten and end up on the table a belly dance. You ain't going back to that place. No, your inhibitions got leveled out so low, and you express parts of yourself in public that you typically don't express in public. And all we're talking about is those things that alcohol does to you sometimes. That when that inhibitions get lowered to a level, and another version of yourself comes out that you typically keep under wraps, and people actually see it. Because you know that self, you know that self. You've given that self a name. For me, his name's Joe. Joe is his name. In fact, I use that name pretty often. I use it to order food when I call in to order food. But Joe comes out. Nobody else is supposed to know Joe. I know Joe. You don't know Joe. You're not supposed to know Joe. But Joe came out. Or whatever name you gave to that part of you, that version of you that you keep inside comes out. And then what you realize, here's what you realize in the morning, that other persons have seen that side of you. That's where the trouble comes in. You know that side of you exists, and you don't have a problem with it yourself. It's a part of you. When the problem comes in is when you realize in the next morning that other people have seen that side of you. That's where the trouble comes in, right? Anyways, the last sentence says the distance between the saint and the sinner. You know where you are in that continuum, distance between the saint and the sinner. Okay, now, Joe. Hey, 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 hey. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is actually all I have for you tonight. Like we said, the show was blaming on the alcohol. I actually gave you two pieces of poetry today. Today I figured I'd give you. Sometimes I'd be talking about everything and forget the poetry. This is the Evening People Show, and we're about that poetry. We're about that poetry that talks to real things that affect real people in real life. And I gave you two pieces today. I gave you Great Areas, and I gave you whatever the other one name, the Spirits. Yeah. All right, that's the ball game, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed uh, our show today. And we tend to do this live just so we can just do it the way we want to do it. I appreciate y'all checking in. If you're not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, the Martin Matthews Project, go ahead and do that. If you joined the show at some point in the show and your Wi-Fi never straight, yo, when you get a chance and you get a good Wi-Fi, jump back in and check it out. But for right here, right now, I'm a bounce, but join me next week. Next week, I'm gonna be in a new studio. I'm setting something up. Should be lit. Check it out. Take care. Peace.